Hello, this is Dias and a new author's story from my channel Russian Revenge Story. Gennady was born and raised in the village. He had only been to the city once in his life, and that was when he and his class went to a museum. But for some reason the memories of the noisy city were etched into his memory, and he knew from childhood that he wanted to live there. The village realities did not suit him because there were no prospects in the wilderness, and even earning some money was problematic. All the villagers worked in the district city and got to work every day by bus or bike. Gina looked at his fellow villagers and thought that he did not want to live like that. The thought of moving to the city did not give him peace. The guy studied well at school, but he himself understood that he would not see higher education. He was an average student. Sometimes he was too lazy to do his homework. But he was warmed by the thought that he could find a job even without a diploma. After finishing school, all of Gina's friends went to study or went into the army. Those who stayed went to work on the farm. The guys in the village had no other option. Gennady was not taken into the army because of problems with his bones. He was not particularly upset. On the contrary, he was inspired that he had every chance to start life anew in the city. Gina's father is a tractor driver, his mother is a veterinarian. In the village they earned pennies, but they were grateful for that. Nikolai Vasilievich worked tirelessly all week, and on weekends he relaxed in front of the TV with a bottle of beer. His mother worked on the farm, and she also ran around the village on calls if someone's cattle was sick. The Bolotovs never thought about city life because they were typical villagers and they liked it at home. At first, Gina's parents did not understand his whim to go live in the city. They persuaded him to study to be a veterinarian, like his mother, and to stay and work in his native village. But the son was adamant. He decided everything for himself at the age of 14, when he realized that if he stayed in the village, he would ruin his life forever. His parents were against it, but they had to come to terms with it. They gave their son some money for the first time and let him go in peace. His father only said, "Just don't disgrace us there." Gennady promised that he would try. He was full of hope and believed that he would succeed. Upon arriving in the city, the guy got a job at a tannery. Gennady liked the job. They paid well to start with, especially since the guy was hired without an education or work experience. Often, after a hard shift, the young man would go home on the bus, and he would sleep along the way. Usually, his comrades would push him in the shoulder, not letting him pass the stop. But one day Gina stayed for overtime, so he went home alone, and there was no one to wake him up. He was saved by a girl who was riding the same bus. It wasn't her first time riding with Gennady. She already recognized him, and she lived one stop further, so she remembered where he usually got off. The girl woke Gina up and said that in a little while he would oversleep his stop. The young people exchanged a few phrases and felt a strong sympathy towards each other. Gina didn't want to get off the bus anymore. He dreamed that the doors wouldn't open at all, and they would ride in circles with their new acquaintance all night. That evening the guy rode on and got off at the next stop to see his fellow traveler home, whose name was Svetlana. On the way to the girl's house, the young people chatted about everything under the sun. Sveta told him that she was an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, and now works as a seamstress at a factory next to the plant. Gina was surprised. It seemed to him that he had known this girl all his life. She was so cheerful and sweet, behaved naturally, which is what caught his attention. When parting, the young people agreed to meet again tomorrow. Dates followed one after another. Soon Sveta and Gina began dating, and they did not delay the wedding. They got married 6 months later. It was a beautiful wedding, and all their friends were happy for them. They were perfect for each other and were in love and happy. They could not even quarrel. There was no reason to quarrel. Gina's parents, who came to the wedding from the village, could not be happier that they had such a wonderful daughter-in-law. A year and a half later, the Boltovs had a daughter who immediately became the meaning of life for the parents. The girl was named Mariana. She was such a cutie, and in appearance she was the spitting image of her mother. The child's childhood was marred only by the frequent illnesses of her mother, who for some reason showed signs of a stomach disease early. She was treated at home, postponing a visit to a specialist. Gennady was against this approach to treatment, but his wife was adamant. What her husband did not do to persuade Sveta to go to the hospital. But the woman assured that it was simple gastritis, and she knew how to treat it herself, took painkillers and enzymes, and said that everything would be fine with her. One fateful morning, Svetlana felt slightly unwell and dizzy. Deciding that she could cope on her own, Sveta continued to fuss around the kitchen as if nothing had happened, but by midday her condition had worsened and her husband had to call an ambulance. Svetlana was pale, barely breathing, and was covered in sweat. On the way to the hospital, she fell into a coma and upon arrival was immediately placed in the intensive care unit. The doctors, trying to calm Gennady, assured him that everything would be fine, and the next day the man was stunned by the terrible news. "We are very sorry, but your wife died half an hour ago. We could not do anything. Please accept our condolences, but medicine is powerless in such cases." Gennady began to cry, not knowing what to say to his daughter Mariana, who had lost her beloved mother half an hour ago. Of course, he grieved, did not sleep at night, but for the sake of his daughter, Gena tried to bring himself to an adequate state. You can't get your wife back, but you have to raise your child. Gennady didn't give up and did everything so that his little girl would not want for anything because she became the main meaning of his life. While his daughter was in kindergarten, the young widower worked overtime at the plant and eventually got on the list of the best employees. He worked tirelessly to forget and get out of depression. Others in his place would have long since become alcoholics, but Gina couldn't stand alcohol. He turned all his pain into energy and directed it in the right direction. One day, when the guy was getting to work on the bus, a thin, pale boy of about 10 came up to him. He hesitated and hesitated for a long time, but then suddenly blurted out, "Uncle, please give me 50 rubles. I'm ashamed to ask you for money, but I'm hungry. There is no food at home. The parents drink. They drink everything away." The man looked at the child with pity, then reached into his pocket and pulled out everything he had. He practically gave away the last of it. He rummaged in his bag, took out a bun left over from lunch, and gave it to the boy too. "Thank you. I will definitely pay you back," the boy whispered with tears in his eyes. Gennady had no idea that at that very moment the boy had sworn to find him and repay the debt. The child was conscientious and principled, but the man simply helped him, asking for nothing in return. 10 years flew by. Bolotov never got married, but he raised a beautiful daughter and succeeded at work. Gennady achieved that his salary at the plant increased noticeably thanks to his persistence and determination. In his joy, he bought his daughter a bicycle and taught her to ride in her free time. One day, trying to overtake her classmates, Mariana lost control and was hit by a car. She was no longer able to get out of the way on her own, so an ambulance had to be called. It turned out that the girl had a damaged spine and would most likely never walk again. Gennady was beside himself with grief. The doctor gave the man hope that there were clinics that practiced non-traditional methods of treating musculoskeletal injuries. Unfortunately, they were talking about expensive operations with exorbitant amounts of money. Although Gina had started to earn well, he did not have that kind of money. The man was very depressed, but he did not show his sadness to his daughter, saying that everything would be fine. Mariana was discharged from the hospital a month later. She could not get used to the fact that she would have to live in a new way, not like before. Now the girl had to master a wheelchair and get used to the life of a person with disabilities. Several more years passed, during which Gennady tried to collect the necessary amount for his daughter's operation. By this time, Mariana had turned into a real beauty. Everyone looked at her luxurious facial features, hair, sweet smile, and mentally pitied her, because how could such a beauty become a cripple? Unsuccessfully trying to collect funds for his daughter's treatment, Bolotov fell into depression and lost faith. But when it seemed that there was no help to wait for, there was a knock on the door of his house. On the threshold stood a handsome young man, dressed in expensive clothes, who looked about 30. "Hello, you probably don't recognize me." Gennady shook his head, looking at the young man in surprise. Then the stranger took several bills out of his pocket and handed them to the owner of the house. When the man took them in his hands and counted them, a smile crossed his face. He understood everything and automatically put 50 rubles in his trouser pocket. He remembered the incident 20 years ago when he gave the boy 50 rubles and treated him to a bun. Now that same boy was standing in front of him, only 20 years older. What a principled person, thought Gennady, but invited him into the house. The guy entered and immediately saw Mariana in a wheelchair. The girl was trying to pour herself some tea at the table. Artem saw that she could not handle the kettle, ran up and helped. Seeing her beautiful eyes and piercing gaze, the man seemed to freeze. He did not expect to meet such a beauty in this house. He immediately felt uneasy. He became timid. All these years, Artem could not forget about the kind deed of the man who gave him his last money 20 years ago. The guy made it in life and became a businessman at the cost of incredible efforts. That's when he decided to find this noble man. All this time he lived in a neighboring city and came only to fulfill his promise, to repay the man's debt. He only remembered that the benefactor worked at the plant. Artem contacted the HR department, found the necessary address, and, lo and behold, met a depressed father with a disabled daughter. The man was shocked. He gave a heartfelt speech and said that he wanted to repay Gennady with kindness. Artem completely covered the costs of Mariana's treatment and even gave money for long-term rehabilitation. Gennady cried like a child. He did not expect that his kindness, done 20 years ago, would return to him like a boomerang. Artem kept his promise, and a month after the successful operation, the girl took her first independent steps, which touched her father again. Gennady became too sentimental. He probably got old. After the operation, Artem began to visit them regularly. He helped Mariana, bought her medicine and vitamins, helped her enroll in distance learning at a university. The girl imperceptibly fell in love with her savior, not suspecting that he had been in love with her from the first day they met, but still could not bring himself to confess. After Mariana got stronger and got back on her feet, Artem invited her on her first date in her life. The man arranged an open-air picnic for the girl, gave her a huge bouquet of flowers and confessed his feelings. Mariana was shocked by such a man's attitude towards her, but she felt mutual attraction and was not against this union. After 6 months of dating, Artem proposed, to which Mariana happily said yes. Gennady was only glad that his daughter had arranged her life and began to hint to the couple that they should not put off having grandchildren. The wedding was cheerful and noisy. The bride's father unexpectedly met Artem's cousin Anastasia, who had clearly been making eyes at him the entire evening. So by the end of the party it was already clear that not only Mariana had arranged her personal life, but apparently her father had too. If you liked the story, please support me with a like. And to learn about the release of new, interesting stories, subscribe to my channel. All the best to you. Thank you for watching.